Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Data Endures November Tech Talk. I am Kirsten Burke, and I am joined, as always, by Shaheen Peruz, Data Endures Chief Technology Officer and Chief Information Security Officer.
Hi, everyone.
Good morning, Shaheen.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. We're excited to be here with you this morning and are using a little bit of the holiday, where we are in the holidays, to theme out our talk today. Thanksgiving, Friendsgiving. We've been having a lot of conversations in the course of our history, but even more recently now with our managed services, with managed services providers. So we've had previous tech talks about what's the difference between a managed service provider and a managed security service provider. But what we really want to talk about today is the struggle that we're finding our partners, our managed security partners, go through. Interestingly enough, we spend a lot of time talking about our customers and about the end customer organizations and how they're struggling with security. But MSPs are struggling as well. And a lot of the same reasons, a lot of the same things that affect our end customer affect MSPs as well. And so we just wanted to talk a little bit today, and we call it Friendsgiving because MSPs are an extension of our service. We help them get broader security services out to their customer base. And so we first kind of wanted to acknowledge them and to say thank you for your partnership, but we also wanted to really talk about some of the things that are afflicting them and challenging them and how we've really tried to come alongside them and help them raise the bar for security, not only for themselves, but help them raise the bar for security for their customers. So Shane, I'll let you lead off a little bit.
Yeah, the reality is when there was no MSP environment or concept back in early 2000s, 1999, 2000, Kirsten and I had the privilege of being at the edge of creating that space for MSPs and creating a lot of subscription computing and technologies. And the concept was simple. It's the idea of creating a centralized IT environment, but instead of for one company, for many companies, and leveraging the scale of that centralized IT organization. And today, fast forward to today, and MSPs are second nature. Mm-hmm. Many people don't even consider doing IT themselves. They have MSPs doing it for them. And it's because of that scale. It's because of the scale of resources. So having to hire one IT person or two IT people for a company that's 100 seats is some of the time those people are going to not work. They're not going to do anything. When you scale up even bigger than that, it starts to get to a point where your IT team is becoming an organization of its own, and it takes a lot of time and energy in the constant refilling of staff, because that first level help desk and user support function is the biggest turnstile in our industry for turnover. So given that concept of the MSP is the centralized IT organization, but one that can be leveraged across multiple companies, it has the same problems that any IT organization has. Mm-hmm. It's still dealing with all of the tools and technologies and processes and procedures and staffing that everybody does. What MSPs do is shield their customers from a lot of that pain by helping to select, helping to pick the right tools, helping the hiring and managing that whole turnover process, putting solid process together and training together so that new people come in and they can hit the ground running. Now, 20 years ago, security was something that was part of everything we did. It was a part of the IT organization. Fast forward to today, and we have entire nation states that are attacking other nations and companies, trying to get access to anything they can to take money from people, B, espionage, C, try to impact the economy. There's lots of factors that are coming in that has made the new world battlefield cyber. And so as a result, we've had to create our own cyber armies, which are the MSSPs and security organizations out there. And that's why the charge of the CISO has increased, and they have board visibility and report to CEOs now instead of to CIOs. So there's a lot of changes in the industry that have happened because of the security landscape as in general. So what's the challenges in context of security on top of the challenges in context of IT? There's 3,000 security vendors out there that are constantly knocking on your door and saying, hey, our tool is better than their tool. You should look at our tool. And it takes a full-time job to do the due diligence, to do the POCs, to do the evaluations. And while the analysts do their best to give us some information, while there's some security shootout firms out there that will give us their best in terms of doing shootouts and giving visibility into what tools are most effective, at the end of the day, you still have to take the time to evaluate it yourself to see if it really works, rather than just in a lab. That's where we come in. We've created a set of, we've taken that concept of MSP and imagined it as security, focused on security and only security. And what we've created is a set of tools to help not just our end customers, but our MSP partners, so that they can put energy into maintaining the health of the organization from a support perspective, maintaining the infrastructure of the organization from an IT perspective, and then having the comfort that there's a team of 24/7 seasoned security analysts with the best in class tools to monitor the environment for threats that are trying to take advantage of that environment. So it's the struggle is real. And we're all dealing with it, no matter whether we're the end customer, we're the IT service provider, we're the tools provider, who is, one of those 3,000 vendors that are talking security is real for everybody. And doing security right is not rocket science. It's just art. It takes time. It's time consuming. Anybody can do what we do. And I've been saying that for 20 years. Anybody can do what we do. We just have taken the time to build the processes, the resources, the training, the support models, all of that to make sure we are ensuring solid security for our customer base.
Well, and I think when you think about the charter of an MSP, or maybe how they got started, right? We talked about kind of our history, but a lot of these folks maybe started as a reseller. They were very, vertically focused or industry based, or maybe they were, to your point, break, fix, help desk. And as you look at how the market moves, right, they've got a very solid relationship with their customer, right? And so they are a trusted resource. There's someone who's there to your point, fill in the gap. And so where is it that you turn as a customer? The first place you turn when you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm hearing all this stuff about security, or, all my folks are now distributed. What do I do? And so a lot of times, like you said, these folks are the front line or the first line where they go and say, hey, can you do this for us? And I think for these MSPs, as they're trying to scale, as they're trying to grow, as they're trying to add differentiation or new customer value, right? The first thing you're going to do is when customers start asking, how quickly can I do this? How effectively can I do this? And so having to go build it yourself, just like our customers, having to go build it, having to go staff for it, is a heavy lift. And is that where you want to draw your resources? Because that could pull away from your customer focus, that could pull away from some of the other things you're doing. So, we're really helping MSPs accelerate their entry into the security space, as well as ensure that what they're bringing on is going to fill and strengthen that posture in a way that it would be very hard for them to do on their own in the same time span.
Exactly. It's, if you look at the MSP space, a large majority of MSPs did come from the reseller path, and their DNA is to sell the customer the technology and then manage it. And that doesn't work in security, because the security tools are constantly changing. If you have a good monitoring tool for network monitoring, or a remote management tool, or a patch management tool, those tools change from time to time. But endpoint security specifically has changed so drastically in the last 20 years that I would say that I have used almost every single endpoint security technology, starting from the early days of McAfee and Symantec to today, where traditional antivirus just doesn't work. And if you stuck with what you picked, and if you continue to recommend what you pick, there's a challenge of managing that. But even more so, if you're recommending a tool to a customer, they buy it and they buy a 3-year license for it, and then a year later you realize that tool is not effective and you need to implement a new tool. Now all of a sudden you have to go back to that customer and say, I know you have 2 more years of license left, but this is a much better tool. And you're going to have customers that have the new tool and the old tool, and if it ends up being 3 generations, you got 3 tools to manage. That is the world we completely help them avoid.
Right.
Because our security platform is really designed to be, it's an OEM approach to the vendor relationships. So it's designed to include the licenses, the technologies that the end user and the end user partner, the customer, the MSP, take advantage of without having to do the due diligence around selecting the tool, around changing the tool, around getting everything up to speed. And that's a huge lift in terms of the effort that our teams have to do in the architecture and design.
Well, and back to when you were saying they're managing, the end customer purchased a tool and they're managing it. So whenever that happens, if they are recognizing this isn't the best tool, if the customer doesn't switch that out, right?
They're stuck with it.
Well, not only are they stuck with it, but if it's not the best tool, they're more likely to have harm happen. And that blows back to the MSP, right? Because you were managing it, what happened?
Mhm.
So that's not the place where you want to get into debate with the customer. We told you to get rid of the tool and pointing fingers. So,
Right.
You're
especially when you sold them the tool to begin with.
exactly. So it helps resolve a lot of that stickiness that comes with being in that kind of tool factory mentality.
Yep.
The other thing you mentioned too, and it's interesting, I looked at a bunch of different reports, just taking a look at what our MSPs dealing with these days, and obviously one area is automation, right? So whether it's security, whether it's break fix, whatever it is that they're doing, how do I scale and how do I accelerate some of the services or some of the intelligence so that I can then redeploy my people on the right things? And so automation obviously is something that is key for them. What processes can I automate? What monitoring services can I automate? Maybe you can talk a little bit about how that automation plays into really helping those MSPs up their game.
Yeah, the automation has come to mean a lot of things
Mhm.
over the years. In the early days, automation was about onboarding or offboarding. As we moved forward, it shifted to what is today called DevOps, which is automating the creation of infrastructure and the repeatability, or treating infrastructure as code so that you can manage configurations more easily. There's over the last, I would say, 5 years, DevSecOps has started to step up and be more, not so much the provisioning of security, but the automation around response to security incidents. So there's a lot of names for it. There's SOARs, there's DevSecOps, and it's about not just deploying security, but it's about managing what happens when something happens,
Mhm.
and automating the response to when something happens, or automating the triggering of investigations so that you don't have to have 80 humans to be able to identify and threat hunt and find problems in the environment. To build a SOC is expensive. It takes a lot of human resources and training, and for us, an analyst can't operate for 2 months from the time they're hired, and that's assuming they have 3 years of experience before they even started with us at a minimum. And so you hire someone and they can't add any value to the team for 2 months, and then once they hit the ground, they are the junior resources and they have to grow and they have to get their skills, and you teach them how to threat hunt and continue to do things like that. So if you take that notion of the effort it takes to just get to a point where you have people can't possibly scale without what today we're calling, I like to call it augmented intelligence instead of artificial intelligence. So it's deep learning, machine learning, a lot of correlation rules, and where you create those correlation rules, you can't rely on the vendor.
Right.
There's rules and configurations and additional machine learning in our platforms that none of the vendors implement on their own. And we often have dialogues with our vendors saying, you're not catching this. We created rules to do it. Why don't you make it standard? And they're like, well, that's not something that makes sense. And in reality, it's protected many of our customers. We see an attack in one customer, we implement all of the IOCs for that attack in a monitoring mode in our endpoint tools, in our SIM, in all of the correlation rules that find and determine threats. So if we see it in any customer, it pops an alert, and we dig deeper and we create automated responses. So isolation of systems, isolation of networks, and all of those things have to come together across the portfolio of tools. We've got the same problem any organization does. We have 30 products in our technology stack. Managing 30 consoles is hard. So how do you get that level of integration? By all of these correlation rules that we're talking about. You have to integrate the data, so the data is coming into a central source. You have to process the data centrally. You have to be able to identify threats that are coming in from multiple sources and correlate those so that they all line up and say that is an attack on this particular system right now. And ultimately, our goal is to take 6 months of dwell time down to 6 minutes. And that's a huge step way forward for any security organization.
Sure.
Because I can't tell you how many times we've gone in a customer and done incident response, and the hacker wasn't there 5 minutes ago and started the attack. They've been there for 4 to 6 months.
Right. So it's interesting when I hear you talk about that, right? And the automation and all the different capabilities that affords. Traditionally, MSPs are really responding kind of break fix mode, right? Or responsive or reactive. And so I think one of the big changes, or one of the big maybe process changes that goes on is, how do we get in front of these issues, right? So help desk, right? Something's broken, I call the help desk, or whatever it is, where I am responding to a customer issue. And so really infusing that MSP culture and process, and just operating in a realm where they can get in front of the customer issues. We go back to, they're all about the customer, right? All about the customer relationship, all about differentiating themselves and their services. And it would seem to me that proactive ability would be very beneficial to an MSP coming in and either trying to get a net new customer, or trying to upsell or extend the services they've got inside an existing customer.
Right. There's I attend a lot of MSP industry conferences to understand what our partners need and how they can advance their security postures and improve what they bring to the market. And the common theme these days is to separate the technology stack from the security stack, or call it advanced as opposed to security, whatever the case is. But there's a lot of guidance by the mentors in the managed services space to the MSP owners around doing that separation and not just including it. And part of that is, if you just include it in the services you bring to market, it becomes really hard to identify what you're doing, and it allows the customer to think they need to do something for it. Whereas if you separate it out into an advanced technology stack, which is focused on security, and the standard technology stack, which is focused on support and infrastructure, then you have the ability to say, we cover you with the advanced stack for all those things you're evaluating right now. Whereas if you're just doing IT, a new CISO that comes into that organization can very easily say, IT is not enough, we need to do more. And so it gets obfuscated too many layers down. So our real ability to help in terms of that differentiation is to say it's very distinct set of services and tools that we take to market that align with all the industry acronyms that are out there right now. And our MSP partners have the ability to just grab those and run with them and white label them as their own services, so that we become the OEM to them and we become an extension of their security, of their team as their security organization. And as far as our mission is simple, it's I've said this before, we didn't want to become an ambulance chaser and chase after the incident response. We want to prevent it from ever happening. And our goal is to get out in front of as many companies as possible. And one of our best paths is through our MSP partners.
Well, I think that that leads me to kind of the final point that I had thought about was clearly, just like with an end user organization with MSPs, it's finding the right partners. So who do I work with? What tools do I buy? Who's synergistic with how I do business and you know the outcomes that I need, you know, who really helps me get there cost effectively, quickly, all of that kind of stuff. So in all that you've said, you know, if you were to summarize in, you know, 1 or 2 minutes, for organizations, for MSPs looking to find the right partner, how would you recommend they evaluate how to really either start net new with security services or to extend, and what should they look for in a partner to be able to
So
do this well?
just to clarify, your question is around what MSPs should be looking for, or what the end customer.
MSPs.
There's a lot of, I've had many conversations where MSPs will come to me and say, I can use the same tools you do and build what you have. And the short answer is, that's true. Like I said, given time, money, and resources, anybody can do what we did. It's not magic. It's not rocket science. It does lack experience. My team, I would say my leadership team in the technical security space has over 20 years of experience building managed security products and services that we take to market. So this is not something that we just decided security sounds cool, let's do that. This is what we've been doing for an entire career. And many of them have worked with me for many years. Many of them have gone off and worked for massive organizations doing security for them and come back. And that experience is what determines all those correlation rules and automation and what needs to happen. What's the processes that should be there? What happens when a customer calls and they're being hacked? How do we jump in and how? All those factors are, in many cases, when you're building it, things that you learn in the middle of the fire, and sometimes you get burned. And we avoid all of that because it's literally pulling arrows out of our quiver that we've had for decades. And so when you're looking to partner with somebody, you can go to the vendors, and the vendors talk a very compelling game. Many of the vendors say we have 24/7 monitoring of our tool. It's very myopic. It's focused on the tool. And like I said, we have many of those vendors that don't do half of what we do on top of the tool. They're literally deploying the tool, feeling like they've created an amazing tool. There's nothing more they need to do. It does all the great magic. We're just going to put some people in front of it for you. That's not enough. That never has been enough. And when you're looking to answer the question specifically, when you're looking for a partner, the vendors aren't necessarily the right answer. Looking at somebody who's built a security program that you can latch onto, that has 24/7 operations, that has this security depth in the industry, that has been doing this for a long time. I'm not saying us, I am saying us, but let's just say that that doesn't appeal to you. You should certainly be considering, why would I pick one vendor? Because they all sound the same. Do I pick customer XYZ or ABC or DEF? They all have XDR. Why can't I just use one of their XDRs? They all have 24/7 operations. Problem is, which person is going to continue to be the best tool in the market? Because they leapfrog each other every week.
Right. Well, and to your point, and we've talked about this many times, right? There is no one silver bullet. So putting all of your eggs in that one tool basket or that one single vendor basket is risky, because you're maybe filling a gap here, but you know, correlation means pulling data from many places, right? If you've got the one tool, what are you using to correlate, or how are you?
Even if you have 2 or 3, it's still not enough. The one thing I would say, the biggest risk that is created for somebody who feels that the vendor is the right choice for partnership is if you don't have 24/7 security operations yourself, and you're relying on the vendor's 24/7 security operations, and that vendor's technology gets leapfrogged in a significant way so that they are no longer effective. How many of us have moved off of endpoint security tools to another tool? Now you have to find a new security vendor that has that 24/7 operations, and their operations are at least as good as the one you just left. Whereas if you pick a partner that's business is 24/7 security operations and the tool selection is isolated and separate from that, you don't have that problem. You never change the security staff. You're only changing the security tools.
Right.
So the vendor selection process is the easiest part of this thing in terms of building an operation. Building and maintaining and continuing to operate is what really distinguishes and differentiates an organization.
So if there were an MSP out there today, you would just say, give us a call, check us out. Is there any, I don't know, any kind of evaluation that we could offer them that would be helpful?
We can certainly, we have a lot of evaluations for end customers, which we could run on any single MSP to give them an idea of what we do and how we take it to market. We have health checks for almost every service that we offer. And those are complementary, but more importantly, reach out to us and have a dialogue, talk about how we can integrate, how we can help enhance your security posture, and what our channel program looks like in the context of helping you accelerate your security practice. But it's your security practice. We just become your team at that point.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, Shaheen.
Yeah.
And thanks to all of you who are joining us. To those MSP partners out there, or maybe future partners, we thank you for your business. We thank you for your partnership, and in the spirit of our Friendsgiving, we'll say happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you all next month.